All right, good evening. We're ready to get started. 8:40, Maseches Pesachim Daf Kuf Vav. Yesterday, we had learned a sugya that discussed a whole story, and we learned 8 things that we extracted from that story. All the Shema Minads at the bottom of Kuf Hey Amud Beis, wrapping to the top of Kuf Vav Amud Aleph. And tonight we're going to start with the comments of Rav Ashi, who looks at 2 of them and says, really, there aren't 8 differences. Really, 2 of them are one and the same, and there are only 7. Here's what Rav Ashi says, Kuf Vav Amud Aleph, 2 lines down.
Which is the right number, right?
7?
Yeah.
That's for Havdalos. That was true. That's not this. These are just nafkaminas. These are just halachic things that are learned from the story. So Rav Ashi Amar Tamo Pigamo, that if a person tastes the wine, it's pogam the wine, and v'kos shel bracha tzarich shiur chada milsahi. Those 2 things are the same. If you drink a little bit of wine and it's an exact shiur, what's left? Less than a shiur. So he says those 2 things are the same thing. This is pshat. My taima. Ta'amo pigamo. Why do we say that when you taste it, it ruins the wine? Mishum dekos shel bracha tzarich shiur, and you drank a half an ounce, and now you're less than the 3.3 requisite amount of ounces to make a revis. It's interesting that Meforshim point out that Rav Ashi also agrees that drinking a wine, if it's more than 3.3 ounces, is still going to be a kos pagum. But he would know that what's happening in the Gemara, he's saying is that it's not mukhrach from the Gemara about kos pagum. It's not mukhrach, because you could say that the reason why that cup was ruined is because you brought it below the shiur. That's what the point of the Meforshim here is to say, the word of Rav Ashi is to say that it's not mukhrach to say there are 8 differences. It may be that there are only 7. Then says the Gemara 5 lines down, Kuvav Amud Aleph, Rav Yaakov Bar Idi, Kapir Achatzva Pegima. He said, if you drank out of a pitcher of wine, you ruin the whole pitcher. Rav Idi Bar Shisha was a little bit more lenient. Kapir Akasa Pegima. He only said that you can have kos pagam on an actual cup, but not the pitcher. The pitcher would be fine. And then the most strict shita of all, Mar Bar Rav Ashi Kapir Afilu Achavisa Pegimasa. You tilt back. It's a very full barrel of wine, like a full barrel, 3-4 feet off the ground. You lean down and you make a borei pri hagafen and you sip a little bit off the top. The whole thing is pagum. That's the most machmir shita. So let's talk a little bit about kos pagum, and this is of course quoted in Shulchan Aruch. This happens all the time. This is going to be found in Kuf Pei Beis Sif Gimel. That is not where I am here. So in Kuf Pei Beis Sif Gimel, the Shulchan Aruch writes as follows. Tzarich shelo yehe pagum. You need to make sure that the cup of wine that you're drinking from is not pagum, that it hasn't been ruined. She'im shasa mimenu pigamo. If you drink from it, it's going to be ruined. Avalim shafach mimenu l'soch yado. What if you pour out into your hand? Right? Let's say you pour it out into your hand. Is that going to be considered pagum? Is it putting your lips to the drink, or is it pouring it into your hand? So then the Shulchan Aruch says, okli, ein bekach klum. So if you pour off a cup of wine into a cup, and then you want to reuse that cup by adding a little more wine, that's not kos pagum. That's totally fine. So let's say that you know that you need to make 2 kiddushes, and you have double the shiur of a revius. Great. Make a borei pri hagafen. Pour off 3.3 ounces, leave over 3.3 ounces, drink from the second cup, and then someone else can make kiddush, no problem. That's totally mutter. That's not kos pagum. And then it continues the Shulchan Aruch. If you drink from the pitcher, o mechavis katana, key language, a small barrel, have pagum. Avalim shasa mechavis shal eitz gedola, huge wood barrel like the ones that we see that people use for wine nowadays. So then ein lehakpid. So that's what we would do. And the Mishnah Berurah here details what one should do. The Shulchan Aruch details what you should do if you need to make wine unpagum. How do you fix a ruined cup of wine? So the halacha is that you should pour a little bit of wine in from the good wine from the bottle into the cup and then pour the whole thing back in. Why do you have to add in a little bit more? Because we have a halacha, the Mishnah Berurah writes this, and Meforshim right, because we have a concern called ein mevatlin iser lechatchila. The halacha is that you cannot intentionally take something that's forbidden and create a scenario whereby the iser becomes batel. So this wine is now pagum. You're not allowed to make kiddush on it. You want to just pour it back in and have it be mixed in with all the wine and everything is fine, because every drop that goes in becomes batel to the kosher wine. So kos pagum pours in 1 drip at a time. Everything's fine. Say the poskim, that's ein mevatlin iser lechatchila. You're not allowed to nullify the kos pagum like that. It's not allowed. That's why we add a little bit from the bottle so that it's not all iser. And then we pour it back in, and then you re-pour it into a cup, and that's how we solve the problem of kos pagum. This is not uncommon. This happens fairly frequently. I've had children, my little kids, sometimes they want some grape juice, and I've already poured the wine, and they they take a drink out of the cup. So that's kos pagum. You got to start over again. So you add more wine, pour it back in the cup, and then you're good to go. Let's continue in the Gemara. We're about 8 lines down, almost a quarter of the way down. Tanu Rabbanan. Very, very strange initial presentation of this brisa. Zachor es Yom HaShabbos lekadsho, famous pasuk. Zacharehu al hayayin. You should make kiddush on wine. But now look at what the brisa says. Ein li ella biyom. It seems that we only know that you're supposed to make kiddush during the day. B'layla minayin. How do we know that we're supposed to make kiddush at night as well? Says the brisa, a pasuk that doesn't say anything about night. Talmud Lomar Zachor es Yom HaShabbos lekadsho. Says the Gemara, B'layla minayin? The whole brisa is off kilter. When you say B'layla minayin, you're asking, how do we know the chiyuv of kiddush at night? What are you talking about? Adarabba. Iker kiddusha b'layla hu kaddish. The actual mitzvah of kiddush is Friday night. What is this brisa talking about? T'chi kaddish t'chilas yoma b'ayla kiddushay. That when we have a mitzvah of kiddush, it's at the beginning of that day. You're saying the brisa means that Shabbos morning, 12 hours, 15 hours into the day, that's when you start making kiddush to sanctify the day. The day started last night. Of course, the brisa is wrong. Visu, and furthermore, a second problem with the brisa. You asked B'layla minayin, and you tried to answer with Talmud Lomar Zachar es Yom. Tana Mahadar Alayla. The author of this brisa is looking for a marimakom for kiddush at night. V'kanasiv lekradi yamama. And the pasuk says Zachar es Yom HaShabbos lekadsho. That doesn't answer the question. The whole brisa is backwards. It doesn't make any sense. So it says the Gemara almost halfway down Hachi Kamar. You're right. This is pshat. Let's re-understand this brisa that we saw above. Zachor es Yom HaShabbos lekadsho. Zachreu al hayayin. One key additional word. Biknisaso. What does the pasuk mean when it says Zachor es Yom HaShabbos lekadsho? That when Shabbos begins, then you're obligated to say kiddush. That's kiddush Friday night. That's biknisaso. Then says the brisa, Ein li ela b'layla. The only thing I know about kiddush at this point is that b'knisaso, there's an obligation to say kiddush at night. Friday night kiddush is a din d'oraisa, both for men and for women. B'yom minayin. How do we know about the day? Talmud Lomar. Look at the word in the pasuk. Zachor yom. Zachor es yom hashabbos. The word day. Very good. So that's how the Gemara explains that Tosefta, that brisa, that really we have the pasuk of Zachor Yom Shabbos lekadsho on the whole to teach us that b'knisaso, when Shabbos begins, we have the mitzvah of kiddush. Shabbos day, the only reason we know that we have kiddush is based on the word yom. It's important to note that Kiddush Friday night is deoraisa, but Kiddush Shabbos day is derabanan. However, called the tikkun derabanan kein deoraisa tikkun, the halachos that we have by Shabbos day are the same as the halachos that apply by Friday night. So over Shabbos, we learned about, last week I should say, we learned about some of the halachos of being Kiddush el b'makom suda, poris mapu mekadesh. All of those halachos that apply by Friday night are the same halachos that apply by Shabbos day. It's just that one's deoraisa and one's derabanan. Good. Halfway down, what's the bracha on Shabbos day? Biyom my mevarich. What's the bracha on Shabbos day? So it says the Gemara, Amar Yehuda Borei Pri Hagafen. The halacha is that all you really technically need to say is Borei Pri Hagafen. So we add B'Shamru, some people add Askin Sudasa. That's all, a whole bunch of minhagim. If you look in different Sidurim, the Sephardim do more than the Ashkenaz. Fine, whatever, the whole bunch of minhagim. But if you just said the words Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Borei Pri Hagafen on Shabbos day, that counts for Kiddush. And as I mentioned in the past, when a bris is done on Shabbos, that's all that's said for Kiddush is Borei Pri Hagafen when the Mevarech, the Mevarech Me'umad, when he's making the brachos after the bris milah. So the Rav should make an announcement that this counts for Kiddush, and that's all they say. They don't say V'Shamru, nothing. They just say Borei Pri Hagafen. So that's Ladina, the minimum. Then the Gemara tells a story about Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi Ekla L'Mechoza. Rav Ashi went to go visit the city of Mechoza. Amruleh, he's a chashuv Talmud Chacham and Amora, and they said to him, Likadish lan mar Kiddusha Rabbah. We'd like you to say the great Kiddush, Kiddusha Rabbah. This is why when you look in Benchers, it calls this Kiddusha Rabbah. We call the Kiddush on Shabbos day Kiddusha Rabbah. But here's the thing. Rav Ashi wasn't yet sure what the halacha was. As I mentioned the other day, some of these halachos were still developing in the times of the Amoraim. Rav Ashi was one of the latest of the Amoraim. He lived in the 6th, even later centuries of the Amoraim. You're talking hundreds of years after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, hundreds of years after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. We're talking, I'm guessing, the 400s, 500s, late, relatively late. But he didn't know how to make Kiddush in Mechoza. He knew how to make it at home, but in Mechoza, he didn't know. Amar, Michti, all right, I need to see what's going on here. In general, Kol HaBrachos Kulan, when we talk about making Kiddush in general, what do we say? Borei Pri Hagafen Amrei Bereisha. That's the first bracha that we need. But he didn't know if that was the only thing that they wanted. Maybe they made Kiddush on Shabbos day the same way they did by Shabbos night with the whole second bracha on Kiddush Hayom. He didn't know. So here's what he did. He had to figure it out. He didn't want to embarrass himself. So here's what he did. Amar Borei Pri Hagafen. He was making the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam Borei Pri Hagafen. However, ve'agid bei. He dragged out. He was very slow with his bracha. And then what he was doing, he was watching to see the reaction of the crowd. If everybody sits patiently, then he would make a diuk that there must be a second paragraph because everyone's sitting calmly. But if someone starts leaning over to drink out of their cup, then it must be that all they say is Borei Pri Hagafen. The Kachaba, that's what happened. Says the Gemara. Chazye, he saw Leahu Saba. He saw an older gentleman. He was getting to the end of Baruch Atah Hashem, nice and slow. Elokeinu melech haolam, and he slows down and he looks around the room. And there was a Saba de Gachin V'Shasi. There was an older gentleman who was leaning over and he picks up his cup to drink it. What was the diuk? All I need to say is Borei Pri Hagafen. Kari Anafshe, they said about him, Hechacham Einav Birosho. This is, of course, a well-known pasuk that's quoted all the time, a pasuk from Koheles. The wise person has eyes in their head. Namely, use what you have around you. Use the information around you to learn a little bit. He didn't know what the minhag was in Mechoza. So he said the bracha Borei Pri Hagafen slowly. In turn, he learned from the Saba, this older person, that he started picking up the cup to take a drink. This leads to a great shaila of whether or not other people can drink their cup of wine prior to the mevarich. And it seems from here that he totally can. Because right when he finished Borei Pri Hagafen, Gachin, Vishasi, that he actually drank, was a good shaila. Okay, this gets into the question of whether or not when I am being motzei you in a bracha, is my bracha that I say for you the same for you as it is for me? Or is it really not? Really, I need to eat first, and maybe you need to wait. So that's a shaila in the post. Okay, so continues the Gemara, 3/4 of the way down, 10 lines from the bottom, Kuvav Amad Amrei b'nei Reb Chia, Mishalo Hivdil b'motzei Shabbos, Mavdil b'holech b'chol haShabbos kulo. We saw this din already once. And Reb Chia, very early Amora, he says someone who forgets to make, or I should say, who doesn't make Havdalah and Motzei Shabbos, Mavdil b'holech b'chol haShabbos kulo. He is allowed to make Havdalah all week long. This word Shabbos is reference to a week. Says the Gemara, V'ad kama. How? What does that mean? Mamish the whole week? No, not the whole week. So he answers the Gemara, Amar Reb Zera, ad, up until, but not including, Revi'i b'Shabbos, up until Wednesday, namely through Tuesday, you are allowed to say Havdalah. So that's the din in the Gemara. This is quoted in Shulchan Aruch, and it's quoted in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Tzadi Testi Vav. So here's what the Shulchan Aruch writes: Shachach v'lo hivdil b'Motzei Shabbos. Let's say that a person forgets to make Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos. Mavdil ad sof yom shlishi. He could make Havdalah up to and including Tuesday, but no later. Only Sunday. But when you're making a delayed kiddush, you don't say all of the brachos. The ner and the besamim are only on Motzei Shabbos. So therefore, all you say is Borei Pri Hagafen and Hamavdil. And the Mishnah Berurah here writes that you're really not supposed to eat until you make Havdalah. You have a real driver to make sure that you make Havdalah. And as we discussed the other day, it's possible that in the name of Rabbi Akiva, that even drinking water could lead to some terrible diseases as it relates to eating or drinking prior to Havdalah, though the Rabbanan were not concerned for that in the Gemara. And I know that Reb Moshe has a tshuva on this as well, that when there's a pressing need, one can drink water prior to Havdalah, but of course better not to. So the Gemara continues with some of this information, but that's just to clarify the halacha of Reb Chia, that it makes it into the Shulchan Aruch with Reb Zera's qualification. If you forget to make Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos, so then you can make it up to and including Tuesday. Ki hadi Yossi Reb Zera kamed de Ravasi. This is what happened when Reb Zera was in front of Ravasi. V'amrei la Ravasi kamed de Rav Yochanan. Some say that it was Ravasi sitting in front of Rav Yochanan. V'Yossi v'Ka'amar le'inyan Gittin. They were talking about the halachos of Gittin. So in a get, they were saying in which part of the week the get was going to be given. So it says the Gemara, Chad b'Shabsa when we talk about Sunday, Trei b'Shabsa when we talk about Trei Utlasa on Monday, and on Tuesday that's called Basar Shabsa. Those days are attached to the previous Shabbos. So today is Sunday. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all of those days are considered to be attached backwards to the previous Shabbos. However, Arba v'Chamisha u'Male Yoma, on Wednesday and on Thursday, Male Yoma is going to be Friday. Those are all considered Kame Shabsa. Those days are all prior to the next Shabbos. So the line in the sand in the week is end of day Tuesday right before Shkia, where we'd say Zay Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Those are all Basar Shabbos. So those are all days that follow the previous Shabbos. But once we tip to Wednesday, done. That's already leading up to the next Shabbos already. And we learn basically from there. It seems that we make some type of comparison, a limud, not directly from Gittin, but we extract an idea from Gittin that days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, are days of Shabbos. They're connected to the previous Shabbos. The Sifrei Hashkafa speak about this tremendously. Ayin Shah. Then says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Yaakov Bar Idi Aval Lo Al Haor. It is correct that if a person does not make Havdalah on Motzei Shabbos, that they can make Havdalah on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. But as quoted in Shulchan Aruch, you're not allowed to do the candle. You're not allowed to make that bracha because that's only on Motzei Shabbos. That's when fire was created. Adam Arishon, whole story there. Last line of Kuvav Amar Aleph. Amar Rav Birona Amar Rav. Rav Birona Amar Rav says as follows: Hanotel Yadav Lo Yikadesh. Let's say that a person's spacing out. Or let's say that a person thought that their kiddush counted and it didn't. They made a shehakol on a cup of schnapps, but they didn't eat a kazayis afterwards. That's not called kiddush. And let's say you did that. You were in someone's house, not your own house. You made a l'chaim on a schnapps, shehakol ne'abidbaro. You drank it, but you didn't eat the kazayis. Then you switch buildings and you come home and you're like, I was yotzei kiddush, and you wash your hands. Natilas yadayim. Then someone says your kiddush wasn't a kiddush. So what does he do? Does he make kiddush now? So the Gemara says, Hanotel Yadav, if you've already washed your hands, lo yikadesh, you're not allowed to make kiddush anymore. And not at that point, at least why not? Take a look at Rashi. Top Rashi, Kuvav Mebez, Dibur Hamaschil, Notel Yadav, lo yikadesh, the Kiddusha Mafsik, Beinatila La'achila. That if one were to make kiddush, it's considered a hefsek between the washing of one's hands and eating. It's considered a total separation. It's as if your brain is focused on other things. And if in fact he were to hear Kiddush and say Amen and take a drink, whatever it is, he would then be obligated to wash Netilas Yadayim again, because it's called the Hesach Hadas. Why does he have to wash his hands again? Because the whole concept of washing Netilas Yadayim is Srach Truma, to make sure that we know that when the Beis HaMikdash comes back, that the Kohanim will be careful with their hands as it relates to Tuma. But if there's a Hesach Hadas, then we don't know what you did with your hands. We have no idea. Your hands could have touched a part of your body that's covered, could have touched something that's Matuna. We don't know. So therefore, we're out of concern that your Hesach Hadas might have led to your hands becoming Tameh. We therefore say, top line, Kuvav Mabeis, Hanotel Yadav Lo Yakadesh. Amar Lehu Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta. He says, what are you talking about? Who said this line? Rav Birona. Rav Birona, what are you talking about? Akati Lo Nachnafshe Derav. Our Rebbe hasn't even died yet, and Shechachaninhu Lishmai to say. You're already forgetting what the Rebbe taught. Unbelievable. You got to work on yourself. You got to be a little bit more focused. Why? What did their Rebbe say? What did Rav do that made Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel Bar Marta annoyed and upset at Rav Barona? So this is something that we've seen before. Zimnin, says the Gemara. Skipped a line. Oh no, I didn't. Zimnin Sagian many times have a ka'imna kame de Rav. I was in front of my Rebbe. I was in front of Rav. Zimnin dechaviva ale rifta nekadesha rifta. Sometimes he was so excited about eating the bread, he would make kiddush on the bread. We've heard about this idea before. The way that we were always taught about it is if you don't have any wine, you're allowed to make kiddush on the bread, but you wash netilas yadayim, you say vishamru, you say instead of borei pri hagav and baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and that's your kiddush. And that's based on this din of Rav right here. Rav says zimnin dechaviv alei rifta mekadesh rifta, that if he really was more excited about the bread, so then you should make kiddush on the bread. Nothing wrong with that. Make kiddush on the bread. And zimnim dechaviva lechamra, but if really the bottle of wine is a special bottle of wine from a special year, special gift, whatever it is, or the challah that week is shvach, so you're more excited about the wine. So then says Rav mekadesh chamra. How do we pass in regards to all this? We're going to see a whole bunch of shitas now. Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav ta'am eino mekadesh. Very interesting. If a person eats something before kiddush, you're no longer allowed to make kiddush. Unbelievable. Let's see if this plays out, and let's see how it applies to Havdalah. Remember, we've been comparing Kiddush to Havdalah over the last many blot in many different ways. Ba'amine Rav Chana bar Chinana me Rav Huna ta'am maushe yavdil. Let's say that if a person were to actually eat something prior to Havdalah, is it true that we would make an extension, or I should say, do we make an extension to say that if you ate before Kiddush, you're not allowed to make Kiddush? So too, if you ate before Havdalah, you can't make Havdalah. Amar le, ani omer, no, ta'am mavdil. I disagreed to the comparison. We would say that Rav Huna's right, that ta'am, if you drank If you ate something before Kiddush, you cannot make Kiddush. But if you ate something before Havdalah, then he would still say Mavdil. The Ravasi argued. Ravasi Amar Ta'am Eino Mavdil. I disagree that we would say if you ate something before Kiddush, you can make Havdalah. I think the comparison between Kiddush and Havdalah is perfect. That in either case, if you ate prior to executing either Kiddush or Havdalah, you then are no longer able to say Kiddush or Havdalah. Rav Asi says that we do make the comparison fully between the world of Kiddush and the world of Havdalah. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba ikla lebei Rav Asi. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba went to the house of Rav Asi. What did Rav Asi hold about this? Remember, look one line up. Rav Asi said, Ta'am eino mavdil, that if you eat something, you're not allowed to make Havdalah. That's what he said. Now, when Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba was at the home, Ikla lebei Rav Asi, ishtalei, he forgot v'ta'am midi. And what did he do? He ate something. He forgot and he ate something. So what's Rav Asi's din? Rav Asi's din should have been that you're not allowed to make Havdalah because he says Ta'am eino mavdil. Yet what do we see happen here? Havulei kasa v'avdil. And still, nevertheless, they let him make Havdalah. So Amra le debisu, his wife said, what's going on here? Marlo avidacha, you don't let this happen. You just said that Ta'am eino mavdil, yet you just gave him a cup of wine. So he said, Amar le shavke kirabe svirle. I know I'm Rav Asi, I don't allow it, but he holds like his Rebbe. And his Rebbe did allow Ta'am mavdil, that if a person does eat before Havdalah, you are allowed to still make Havdalah. That is how we pass in Ladina, that if a person eats before Havdalah, it's asur. You should not eat before Havdalah. All the dangers within, but one should still make Havdalah in that case. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Shmuel, Ta'am eino mekadesh. Ta'am eino mavdil. This is like the Shita of Rav Asi, and Rav Yosef was later. He was a 3rd century Amor. Rav Asi was earlier. Rav Asi was a Talmud of Rav Yochanan. He was in the 2nd century. So here Rav Yosef, in the name of Shmuel, says Ta'am eino mekadesh, that if you eat before Kiddush, you're not allowed to make Kiddush, and as well by Havdalah, full comparison. The Rabba Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Ta'am mekadesh v'ta'am mavdil. This is all in the name of Shmuel. Is Rav Yosef in the name of Shmuel, or Rabba in the name of Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel? So we don't really know how we paskin here. It's very unclear. But the Gemara says Ta'am mekadesh, that if you eat before Kiddush, you do make Kiddush, but Ta'am mavdil. And if you ate before Havdalah, you as well say Havdalah. Turning to the top of Kuv Zayin Amad Aleph, we're going to go a few lines down. Amar Rava Hilchasa, how do we paskin? Halacha l'maisa, Ta'am mekadesh v'ta'am mavdil. We do make a full comparison between the world of Kiddush and the world of Havdalah, and it is one that is lakula. That if one were to have inadvertently, the truth is even the Meforshim, right? Even if you're bemazed, even if you eat intentionally prior to Kiddush or prior to Havdalah, the halacha is you still would say the subsequent Kiddush or Havdalah. We do not take that away from you, and you should still do so. Umishalo kiddush be'erev Shabbos. If a person did not make Kiddush on Shabbos, mekadesh v'holech kol hayom kulo ad motzei Shabbos. You can make that Friday night Kiddush throughout the entire day on Shabbos until Shabbos lets out. Mishlo hibdil b'motzei Shabbos. We're just a summary sheet of Rava. Rava's kind of giving a synopsis of the last plot. What does Rava say here? Mishlo hibdil b'motzei Shabbos ma'avdil v'holech kol haShabbos kulo. You can say it all week. And it seems from here that he doesn't add in the restriction that we saw before. Ameimar pasach le'lohashmaisa the Rava b'haylishna. Ameimar gives a slightly variant language of Rava's shita. And let's just learn that. And with this, we'll stop. And here's what he says. We're 5 lines down, 6 lines down. Kuv Zayin Amar Aleph. Amar Rava Hilchasa. The halacha is Ta'am mekadesh. That's the same language. Ta'am mavdil. That's also the same language. Mi shelo kiddush be'erev Shabbos. Mekadesh v'holech kol hayom kulo. All the same language, except that it doesn't add in the words ad motzei Shabbos. A little bit of a different language, so we don't know exactly what that means. Is there a difference between Ameimar and the previous shita? Not really clear. Misha lo hivdil b'motzei Shabbos. Someone who did not make Havdalah on motzei Shabbos, same language. Ma'avdil v'holech kol hayom kulo. A little bit of a different language. The first version said Ma'avdil v'holech kol haShabbos kulo. Here it says Ma'avdil v'holech kol hayom kulo. We'd have to spend time doing a perfect analysis to see what, I highlighted the differences, but what would be the halachic differences between these two versions, the Gemara does not detail. We're going to stop right here about 10 lines down, Kuv Zayin Amad Aleph. Mirza Hashem, tomorrow we're going to do more than a blot because at the weekend, the blots are much heavier. They're much larger as we get toward the end of the week, and I'm going to have to overcompensate. Tomorrow night, we're going to learn a blot and a half, and I think hopefully the next night as well. A reminder again, this coming Shabbos, we will not be in person. Motzei Shabbos 8:40 daf on Zoom only, so no in-person Daf Yomi. Wishing you all a beautiful.
You do a blot and a half today. Tonight.
Almost. So it's a big amud there, so not really.
Yeah, we have time. Less than half an hour shiur.
Yep, but I'd have to know the material in order to teach it.
Ah.
Go to. Good night.